guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. Max Verstappen is 63 points behind the championship leader with 6 races and 3 sprints still to go, but Red Bull say they are bringing yet more upgrades to the RB21 to try and give him a chance of overhauling Oscar Piastri. We usually see upgrades around about the US Grand Prix in Texas, but surely with 2026 on the horizon, that would not be expected for many. Red Bull, though, say they have more upgrades on the way, and not just 1 or 2, but potentially still a whole portfolio of upgrades that the RB21 is expected to have. Is it going to be enough to give Max Verstappen the tools to win this championship? Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. This is nothing behind this picture. I just thought I'd put it up there. Now, speaking of actual driver things, let's talk about this. A big deal today around the world of motorsport. So Rovanpera, who won the World Rally Championship, I think a couple of times, like 22, 23, when he was about 22, 23 years old, he's been considered like the Verstappen of the World Rally Championship, and he today confirms that he's retiring from it. Considered one of the most talented drivers on the planet. And today he put this video out on YouTube, on Instagram, all over the shop to basically say, look, it's been a pleasure, but I'm stepping away from rally and I want to go into single-seaters and compete. Well, presumably the target is Formula 1. Now, he can't just rock up to Formula 1 despite a lot of noise around this guy, and for very good reason, being, unbelievably talented driver. And Rovanpera is already affiliated with Red Bull, as lots of these guys tend to be. So as he says in the video, the direction for single-seaters is where he wants to go, and as a result of that, he's going to be racing in Super Formula 2026. Now, this is what a lot of the Red Bull juniors, which technically he falls into the category of, do tend to do, right? We've seen, well, Lawson, whoever, over the last few years. Helmut Marko tends to say, right, if you want a Formula 1 seat, go and drive in Super Formula, learn the trade. It's a racing series in Japan. The cars are pretty similar to Formula 2 cars in some respects. And that's what he confirms. So this is potentially a really big story. It's obviously a couple of years away from meaning anything for Formula 1. Even if he makes it to F1, that would be incredibly impressive in the first place. But to achieve that, the timeline for him will be race in Super Formula next year, then join Formula 2 the year after that, with the intention of getting an F1 seat. So all of a sudden, Red Bull have something to think about for the next couple of years. But yeah, it's a big ambition. It's a big goal. I wish him all the best in that venture. We've seen it before the other way, right? F1 drivers, Kimi Räikkönen, for example, going to rally after their career is done. It's pretty rare that you see a driver at the top of their game in other championships try to come to Formula 1 in quite such let's say indirect way, doing Super Formula F2 then F1. That's the protocol, that's the plan. It's been one of the stories of the motorsport world over the last 12 hours. Tsunoda, does he still have a chance at Red Bull? Many have said for some time, no, Singapore was not pretty at all. It seems pretty certain that Isaac Hadjar will get that seat. Speaking of other seats, though, there are 22 on the grid next year, but it'll be Perez and Bottas taking up the Cadillac seat. Just if you guys were unfamiliar, I mean, this would be expected, but just to say it because it's been talked about, next year qualifying, of course, usually 5 get knocked out in Q1, 5 get knocked out in Q2. It's not going to be 7-5 or something like that. It's more than likely going to be 6 out in Q1, 6 out in Q2, 10 drivers left to fight for pole in Q3. Expected, nonetheless wanted to mention it. Christian Horner, where's he going to go? Anywhere? Probably the answer to that is yes. It's a matter of time. Apparently Christian Horner has been speaking to every single team owner under the sun to try and figure out a way that he can get invested and they can invest in him to be part of their team. Apparently, though, Williams have said, we're not going to close the door, but it feels relatively unlikely that Horner would get involved there. There were rumours that Aston Martin have actually turned down a Christian Horner proposal. Not to say that it won't happen eventually. They were quite coy on commenting on Horner's interest in getting involved. There is some reason to believe it could make sense. Adrian Newey, the relationship with Horner seems to be repaired. Lawrence Stroll would be willing, you would think, to give Horner an ownership stake in the team, as he has done with Newey. The Honda relationship, among other things. The thing for Stroll, though, Lawrence Stroll, I mean, is that Aston Martin really want to attract Max Verstappen, but there is a world where Max just wants to go to Mercedes, and we'll discuss why that could be the case here in a second. But also, if you bring in Horner, does that reduce the chances that you successfully get Verstappen? Probably, just because I don't imagine Max is racing back to be a driver under Christian Horner again. Certainly Jos Verstappen won't be, right? So there's maybe something in that, but time will tell, right? It's going to be a little bit of time, and Horner can't even join a team until the middle of next year anyway, to our understanding. Ferrari were thrown as an option here, but again, Horner wants full control. We know how Ferrari operates, that's not going to be possible. John Elkann says, though, because I think it was basically today when Michael Schumacher won his first ever championship for Ferrari, and it was about 21 years before then since they'd won their most recent driver's title. So since Kimi Räikkönen last won a Ferrari driver's title in 2007, it's coming up on a similar kind of time frame, right? So it is about time that Ferrari get a major reset here and try and put together another dream team, as it were. And John Elkann says, I want to be clear, this is personal. I am committed as chairman, and above all, as someone who has lived Ferrari as a passion my whole life, I'm committed to our people, our beloved Ferraristi, and loyal to Fosi. I probably butchered that badly, but whatever, who are eager to see us winning in F1. Doubles down and says, I'm committed to our beloved Tifosi who entrust us with their dreams, and to our loyal supporters who are eager to see us win again, as we already are in the Endurance World Championship. But they want to win again in Formula 1, but there are a few reasons why that's not been the case for some time. This is Benedetto Vigna, the other top dog. He says in Formula 1 we have to improve, we have to win because we owe it, I suppose, to our loyal Tifosi all over the world. So, you know, nice words, right? But obviously there's a bit more to it than that. There's also a bit more talk as to why Ferrari have struggled so heavily. We know that the flexible wings, they went away earlier this season to a certain extent because they cut down really the FIA on what you could play around with there. But Mercedes, apparently, they brought a new front wing in Singapore, and it actually opens the door for them to bring back some of that flexibility of the front wing. It's more stable under the static load tests, but it will still flex at speeds. And that seems to have given Mercedes a little bit of a step. And, you know, for the last few years, they've been reasonably good at Austin. I would expect Mercedes to at least be in the ballpark in Texas, but we'll see what happens in a few days' time. Ferrari, though, no real optimism again. The team's countermeasures using already designed wings appear to have limited the car's original concept. The front wing was redesigned to comply from Spain onwards, yet the SF25 still fails to generate enough downforce to move forward. The mechanical platform is conservative and continues to restrict balance. So again, I think this is what Leclerc was getting at. They made that relatively big change in Spain. It didn't seem like it massively affected competitiveness, but Leclerc says that other teams have found solutions, whereas Ferrari simply haven't. Maybe they're not good enough to find them, or maybe they've simply designed a car that is not going to respond to any of their ideas, and as a result, Ferrari for some time now have given up on this car, and that is probably the right thing to do. There is, however, a team that hasn't taken that approach, and we'll discuss what the implications of that could be here in a second. The other thing to quickly mention is on George Russell, what his contract looks like. Brundle gave a few thoughts on why Antonelli's contract has not been confirmed yet, and he said that you don't want to announce Antonelli without announcing George, because then there's just too many questions, so they will likely announce both at the same time. There was an article, though, following what happened in Singapore and also in Montreal, that maybe Russell has more leverage now. Does he have much more leverage? Like, as good as that performance in Singapore was, you know, when you're competing theoretically with Max Verstappen for your seat in 2027, it's tough to gain too much leverage. But there is a theory, I mean, Gunther Steiner says that George Russell at least does hold some sort of leverage to try and fight back here, and believes that George is fighting hard for a multi-year deal, and maybe after what happens in Singapore is more likely to get it. I don't know if it really moves the needle much with Toto Wolff, but it's pretty clear what's going on there behind the scenes, and in time we will see what type of contract is signed and whether there's any rumours about some sort of performance clauses that will allow Russell to get that contract extended if he performs to a certain level, maybe get a bit more money in the door, maybe a few less sponsor commitments. That's been all the rumours over the last few years. If George Russell outright refuses to sign a one-year deal, then, you know, we'll see you in IndyCar, I guess, right? Like, what are you going to do? Toto might simply refuse, but also, I guess, if George said, I'm not signing a one-year deal, what does Toto do? Because who are the other options? Max has committed his future for now to Red Bull for at least another year. obviously Antonelli needs someone with more experience alongside him. Bottas is no longer an option because he's gone to Cadillac, so, Russell will stay at Mercedes. There's no real questions there. Does he have much leverage? Maybe he's got a bit more leverage than I initially gave him credit for, but I still think it's going to be a challenge to get Toto to agree to a multi-year contract. Now, speaking of this, Max Verstappen is making it very clear what his future thoughts are, and Max actually made it incredibly evident that he believes Mercedes are going to be at the front. Now, again, we don't really know where all this is coming from. Mercedes are obviously confident in what their car's going to look like, certainly on the engine side. But there were rumours, actually, that Toto had spread this narrative that Mercedes are going to have the best engine, so that engineers from other teams would want to leave their team and come to Mercedes because then they can get the juicy bonuses for winning the championships. But also, if there's a rumour spreading that Ferrari aren't really doing anything particularly special, their car's looking a bit dodgy, then engineers won't want to go there, right? So there was a theory, anyway, that there have been some rumours spread for political reasons that have led to this realization. But look, Toto and Max, they spent their time together on that yacht out in Sardinia. I'm sure they had some sort of conversation. And Max, based on his advice, his advisors, speaking with Jos, speaking with Toto, speaking with other drivers, other teams, whatever, he says, I do believe Mercedes will be at the front. They're a top company. I do believe they'll be at the front, especially when it comes to the engine. So there isn't that much faith that Red Bull are really going to put something together next year. I think it's sensible what Max has done, deciding that, I'm not going to jump ship immediately. Maybe Red Bull do put it together. Maybe Mercedes don't, and then signing a deal with them now with a massive buyout involved wouldn't be a good idea either. So that's the Verstappen angle, but of course it's very relevant to where he wants to go in 2027, which is important for George, but also for Red Bull, because if he knows that Red Bull's engine next year is probably not going to be up to scratch, even Horner said this, McKees has kind of implied it as well, that it's going to be a big challenge for them to have an engine of the same quality as some of the theoretical top teams, especially Mercedes, who we believe might be at least a little bit ahead of the curve. That's going to be a challenge for Red Bull. If they want to win a championship, certainly in the foreseeable future, the most feasible one is probably this year's Drivers' Championship. Yes, it is a tall order, but it is something that apparently they are going all in for. So Red Bull recognise, Laura McKee said this, that there is a sacrifice here. They are sacrificing development time and effort on next year's car to try and give this championship a go, but also to give themselves a bit of confidence that they can actually do it. They're capable of building a winning car again. They've understood where their issues are and some of the ground effect complications that will still be there to a certain extent next season. But the big rumour is that Red Bull's upgrades are not going away. And this isn't even really a rumour. Laura McKees has just straight up said it, that there are more upgrades on the way. Now, we can have a look at the article here from Racing Fan or racefans.net. They actually put together this little graphic of all of the upgrades on the recent rounds. And, well, this is Austria, the top one. You guys can see Austria, Britain, Belgium, Hungary, Dutch Grand Prix, Italian, whatever. But if you look at the top teams, you'll see that, Ferrari have brought the occasional thing. There were a few tweaks in Italy. No real surprise there for Ferrari, obviously. Front wing, rear wing, beam wing. McLaren, they brought quite a few upgrades earlier on. They also brought a few things in Italy. But most weekends, McLaren aren't bringing much. Mercedes have brought a few new things, as we know. They've got that front wing now, which seems to be a bit more flexible. That's given them a bit more performance. But if you compare these boxes of the top teams, Red Bull have brought by far the most. Floor edge in Austria. Of course, the British Grand Prix had that pretty sizable upgrade. The floor body and the fences, the new front wing. In Spa, they brought a number of things. In Belgium, that was Belgium. In Hungary, they brought a couple of things. In the Netherlands, they brought a new front wing. I mean, look how many front wing tweaks they've made here. Then Monza, they brought another pretty significant change with more changes to the floor. And even, every round, right? You look at these rounds since the Austrian Grand Prix, every weekend they brought something. There were like 4 weekends where McLaren haven't brought anything, 4 weekends actually where Ferrari haven't brought anything, 3 weekends where Mercedes haven't brought anything. But Red Bull have done something new every single weekend. You might think, oh, that's it now, right? They've made the car, now the focus is on next year. To be fair, the focus from Red Bull will have been on next year from quite a while ago. Things take time to actually manufacture. And usually we see Austin, which is the next Grand Prix, with roughly 6 rounds to go. We have historically seen some upgrades at around that time, right? We've seen it in the past, let's say, for Mercedes. they used to quite enjoy bringing an upgrade to Austin, but that was usually in a world where next year was pretty similar to this year, right? Like Mercedes like to 2022, 2023 bring upgrades to Austin that generally worked with the feeling that, okay, this is big because next year's car is going to be an evolution of this year's car and it's important to get the understanding. But you wouldn't necessarily have expected, on the verge of the biggest regulation shift from an aerodynamic and chassis side combined, arguably in the history of Formula One, certainly in recent times, you might have expected that those upgrades would simply not arrive, right? The teams would be so focused on 2026 that any upgrades around Austin or even beyond would not even be a consideration. But for Red Bull, that they certainly still are. For other teams, we don't really know. I'm not expecting much, if anything, really, from the other teams from now to the end of the season. But Laurent Mekies says this: we have made a step forward and we know we have more coming. So good stuff. Now, so he's giving a lot of optimism. I don't know, if you're a Verstappen fan, you're reading this, if you're Max Verstappen, you're hearing this, your ears pricking up, right? Is there actually a lot of optimism that maybe they could do this? I think it's got to be true that with Verstappen's result in Singapore, look, if he'd have stuck it on pole, he probably would have won the race, right? And the McLarens were not quite there in the picture. And maybe Russell is going to continue to be in the picture now as well, and Antonelli possibly to continue throwing a spanner in the works, because if Max is first, but it's the McLaren second, third, then not going to be enough. He needs somebody else to be in the mix. But I think Singapore was considered such a difficult track for Red Bull in recent years, and for Max himself, to be fair. So to have come a very solid seconds, given all the issues that the car had on race day, and outscore Piastri by 6 points is, it's enough. And if Mekies is saying at a track that didn't suit them specifically that they're pretty happy with it and they know they have more coming. So, it doesn't sound to me like it's just maybe one thing. It seems at least like it's a few ideas that Red Bull still have to stick on this car. And look, it probably will. I mean, Mekies has even said it. It will come at a cost of next year. But the idea of them still bringing upgrades, right? We heard these rumours months ago that Red Bull were committing hard to 2025. I didn't expect by the time of the Austin Grand Prix to be talking about potentially multiple upgrades still on the horizon. I mean, how many rounds in a row now have they brought some sort of change? It's an awful lot. Maybe that's going to continue. And if it does, you would expect Red Bull to have the fastest car by the end of the season. And if Red Bull have anywhere close to the fastest car, Max will have what it takes to win several more races. And it's been over a month now since McLaren have won a race. Not like a crazy stat, but, Verstappen's won a couple, then George Russell. It's been a little while since the last Grand Prix that McLaren actually won. And if that continues, Max will feel pretty confident, even if his numbers with Leclerc on a podium and his numbers with Norris on a podium do not, well, let's say, change in the favour of the Ferrari driver. But yeah, Mercedes won a handful of days ago. Red Bull was Max's last win. McLaren's over a month and a bit now, and Ferrari's almost a year. So that kind of puts things into context of where things currently lie. But intrude to your thoughts in the comments below. As I say, Texas, maybe Russell can be in the mix again. I think as much as Verstappen and George, they have a bit of rivalry there. I mean, a bit of a rivalry. They've had quite a few spicy moments over the last few years. Max kind of needs George, right? Like, okay, it wasn't ideal what occurred in Singapore from Max's perspective, but I think Max will be pretty happy if the Mercedes is an improved car, if the new front wing has actually given them some more performance, and they can be competitive in Austin, where they have been relatively competitive over the last few years. Now, George has never podiums there, but he does have 2 podiums in a row. He's actually never had 3 consecutive podiums in a row. So this will be the opportunity. And if the Mercedes is competitive and Max can win, George seconds, Norris third, Piastri fourth, hypothetically, kind of similar to what happened in Singapore, that's a pretty big points delta, right? That would mean, let's say Piastri's third. That's a 10-point swing, as long as Verstappen wins the race. And ideally, Norris isn't second, because then that's only a 7-point swing on him. And, the gap there is still pretty substantial in the championship as well. What is the gap? 41 points or so between Verstappen and Norris. So 41 points over 6 rounds. 7 a round is 42. Right? So, theoretically, I guess, if Max wins, Norris is second, Piastri's third, like every weekend, it just about works out depending on the sprint races. But really, George being in the mix, yeah, in a theoretical world, you might think, well, could Ferrari do something? But I don't think anyone's got really any faith that's going to happen, right? So I think from Max's perspective, as much as there's been that big rivalry with George over the last couple of years, and they're not exactly best of friends, they are to some extent going to team up against the McLarens if Max is going to want to win this championship, which of course he does. So very much interested in your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.